A trip to the Holy Land is one of the best ways I know to grow in the Christian faith. Hi everybody, my name is Brian Price. I'm the pastor at First Baptist Church in Spring City, Tennessee, for those of you who don't know me. And I'm so very excited that you've chosen to join with me to go on this pilgrimage to the Holy Land so that we can learn more about our faith. As I mentioned a moment ago, I truly believe that a trip to the Holy Land can have a profound impact upon the way that you view Scripture and the way that we grow in our faith. And that's because it impacts the way that we read the Bible. Being able to just go and to see the sites where so many of the events of Scripture took place has a tremendous impact on the way that we view Scripture. It helps us to visualize the events of Scripture. It's an incredible boost to one's faith. And well, it's just a lot of fun. So again, I'm excited that you're joining with me on this pilgrimage to Israel. Now, before I go any further, allow me to say this. If you have any questions or concern regarding your trip, please feel free to reach out to me. I'll be glad to do anything I can to help you and make sure that you're well prepared for this journey. In all, this is the 7th trip that I've led outside of the U.S., and it'll be my 2nd trip to the Holy Land. Now, I'm not in charge of the itinerary or the hotels or the flights or anything of that nature. We are joining what is called a regular scheduled monthly trip with Maranatha Tours. Nevertheless, as your tour host, I do have a number of responsibilities. So please feel free to reach out to me and I'll be more than happy to help you in any way that I can. Of course, you can also contact the fine folks at Maranatha Tours. They're very easy folks to work with and I'm sure they'll do anything they can to help you. Now, typically when I arrange a trip of this nature, I also schedule a number of meetings at our church, and during those meetings I like to cover things like the logistics of the trip and some helpful packing tips, and maybe also share some information about the biblical sites that we'll be visiting. But this trip is unique, and it's unique because a number of you who are going on this trip with us aren't from around the immediate area, and I know it would be very difficult for you to drive all the way to Spring City to meet together. So I felt that perhaps just putting together a series of videos might allow us to share the information that you need to know about the trip. And that will be without burdening you to drive that long distance. Nevertheless, you can also join in the discussion at our Facebook page. And that Facebook page is simply Israel Travel 2009. There are others in that group who traveled with me on the last trip, and I'm sure they'd be willing to answer any questions that they can to help you out on this trip. Now, if you don't have Facebook, don't worry. Feel free to contact me directly, and I'll do anything I can to help. Well, in this video, I mostly want to cover some of the logistical questions that people typically ask about a journey of this nature. So here's what I want to talk to you about today. In the next few moments, I'd like to talk to you about those important financial details of the trip, also about your passports, about the kind of weather that you can expect to encounter when we're in Israel, what you can wear and what you really shouldn't wear on the trip. Also some packing tips that might help you out, some of the travel details, though we don't know all of those quite yet. Also talk about where we're going to be staying and what we're going to be eating and things of that nature. And allow me to add that a lot of those details are found in your booklet, the Know Before You Go booklet. When you send in your deposit for the trip, you should receive a booklet that looks something like this in the mail soon after. And it'll cover a lot of the details that we're going to talk about today. So be sure to read through it and to study it to make sure you're familiar with all of the information that's in here, okay? Having said that, as you go through here, you're going to notice a number of important things. For example, this page here, it says a countdown, and it tells you what's going on at what point in time during the preparation for this trip. And one of the important things you need to know is that final payment for your trip is due on Friday, March 29th. Now, the booklet actually says 45 days prior to departure, but as I added up on my calendar, that's what I come to. So Friday, March 29th, your final payment needs to be in the office at Maranatha Tours. And I say that because if your payment is late, they do charge a penalty. And that penalty is $100 per person. So make sure that you get your money in prior to that. I wouldn't want you to have to pay that penalty without any reason at all. Also keep in mind that credit cards can be utilized. However, if you utilize a credit card to make your final payment, there is a 5% surcharge. And in addition to that, credit cards cannot be utilized to book the airfare portion of your trip. So the best thing to do is just avoid using credit cards entirely if you possibly can. And of course, if there's some reason that you have to cancel the trip and you're just not able to go with us, all the details of the cancellation policy are on the back of the itinerary that you should have received prior to signing up for the trip. So make sure you're familiar with those details as well. Now, one of the things that I often get asked on a trip of this nature is how much money should I carry? Well, the good news is this is what I call a mostly inclusive trip. A lot of people would call it all-inclusive. I don't consider it to be all-inclusive because there are a few minor expenses that you will encounter that you will be out of pocket for. But by and large, most of the cost of the trip is included in that package price. And again, the back of your itinerary will show you the details of what is and what is not included. And I encourage you to look over that. But telling you the exact amount that you need to carry with you is difficult for me to do so because everybody's spending habits are a little bit different. Having said that, here are a few things to keep in mind that are not included in the cost of the trip. For example, expenses to and from the airport. Meals that you're going to enjoy inside the United States. And for example, while you're traveling to the airport or sitting there or traveling home. Also, when you eat your meals, now keep in mind that breakfast and dinner is included in the cost of your trip, but beverages at those meals are not. Now, I don't remember this being a problem last time, but if you wanted sodas or something of that nature, you would have to pay for those. Of course, water is always provided for free, and best of my memory, coffee and tea were provided as well, but don't hold me to that. We're staying at different hotels this time, and I'm not sure if their policies might be different as well, but if you read the fine print on the back of the itinerary, it says beverages at meals are a separate purchase, so just kind of be aware of that. Also, lunches aren't provided. You have a buffet breakfast and a buffet dinner there at the hotel, but our lunches are out on our own. And those lunches typically amount to $10 to $15. That's at least about what it was the last time that we traveled. However, with inflation, I would probably budget $15 to $20 just to be on the safe side, and that's per person for lunches for the 8 to 9 days that we'll be traveling. Also, of course, incidentals are not included, laundry, things of that nature, additional sightseeing that you might want to do on the side, but the reality is you're not going to have time to do a whole lot of that anyway. And of course, souvenirs as you shop around and find things to remind you of the trip. Of course, those things are not included in the cost of the trip. Tipping is included in the cost of the trip, and that's one of the great things. When we're out and about and we have the baggage handlers and the drivers and the guides and the hotel staff, etc., you don't have to worry about tipping any of those individuals. That was all included in the cost of your trip, and I have the responsibility for making sure that every single one of those individuals receives the tip that they ought to receive. So kind of keep that in mind, that you don't have to tip for those places on your trip. The exception, of course, would be when you're out on your own and you're providing your own meals or things of that nature. So just keep that in mind. Another question that people typically ask is, should I exchange money before I leave the U.S.? And the answer to that question is no. Please don't do that. You're going to get a really bad exchange rate if you do that, and you're going to lose some money. So wait until you get to Israel to exchange money. Now, where can you exchange money? Banks and the hotel lobby are the two places that you can exchange money. Of course, you can also go to an ATM and you can withdraw money there out of your bank, and that's an easy way to do it without having to worry about exchange rates and all that sort of stuff. Just be aware as you do, some financial institutions charge a foreign transaction fee for drawing money out of the account. Or maybe even as you use your credit card, there will be a fee that's assigned to that charge each time that you do so. So check with your financial institution in advance and find out whether or not they charge a foreign transaction fee, and if so, what that is. You don't want to get home and have a number of surprises waiting for you on your bill. Also, Maranatha Tours suggests taking $50 in U.S. bills, in $1 bills. The reason being, even though it's a different country, a lot of the vendors are used to having tourists come in, and a lot of them will accept $1 bills from the U.S. So if you do that and then use a credit card for some of your larger purchases, you might not have to exchange much money if any at all. Nevertheless, you can find some more details, page 11 in your booklet, Know Before You Go. One piece of advice that I would share with you is just simply be careful with your money and use some common sense, the same common sense that you would use here in the States. And also realize we're going to be in tourist areas. Now, keep in mind, Israel's a safe country. I firmly believe you're going to be much safer in Israel than you are going to be on the trip to the airport here in the U.S. And I say that and I mean that. However, wherever you have tourists, you're also going to have pickpockets and petty thieves and things of that nature. So you need to use a little bit of common sense as you secure your valuables. And what I typically do is, if I'm carrying a large amount of cash on me, I'll either use a money belt that's hidden under my clothing, or I'll use a neck pouch that hangs around your neck and literally just kind of goes up under your shirt. And I'll keep the bulk of my money there. I only take out enough money for the day, and I keep it in a pocket in a secure area, certainly not in a back pocket or billfold or something of that nature. But I do that so that I don't have to pull out the neck pouch or something during the course of the day, and I've got enough money to get through what I need to do. But you want to secure those valuables, which means don't leave them in your room unless it's in a safe or something of that nature. Make sure that wherever you have your money, your cameras, your laptops, your valuables, make sure it's in a secure location. You don't want to be the victim of petty crime, either there or here in the U.S. Now let's talk about passports for just a moment. I'm assuming if you're taking the trip that you already have a passport. If not, you're in the process of applying for your passport. As you view your passport and you look at the expiration date, make absolutely sure that your passport doesn't expire within 6 months of your return from the trip. If it does, you need to renew it. Traveling to Israel, they won't let you in the country if it's going to expire within 6 months of your exit out of the country. So please double check that and make sure that you're good. Now, something else I would mention to you, in the Know Before You Go booklet, if you will go to the next to last page, I believe, there's this page right here that asks for your passport information, credit card information, etc. If you haven't done so already, you need to follow the instructions and fill that out along with a copy of your passport and forward it to Maranatha Tours as soon as possible. You don't want to forget this. They need this information to be able to book your airfare, so make sure you get that turned in. And I would also encourage you to do something else. You never can tell. I mean, people lose things all the time, and it could potentially be that you lose your passport while you're traveling. And if you do so, it's going to be difficult for you. So I would encourage you to make a color photocopy of that information page, which is typically the first page inside your passport, and then leave a copy of that information with a trusted adult back here in the States. Also, it doesn't hurt to carry a copy or two with you, maybe and keep it in a separate location in case you run into trouble, you misplace your passport or something of that nature. That way, at least you can prove to the authorities, hey, I'm here legally, I do have a copy of my passport. So that's important to keep in mind. Well, let's talk about weather for just a moment. That's one of the questions we typically get. What is it like? How do I dress for the weather in Israel? The problem with that is Israel has a varied climate. And keep in mind, in Jerusalem, you're at an elevation of over 2,000 feet in elevation. When you're at the Dead Sea, you're about 1,500 feet below the sea level. So there's a vast difference in the terrain of Israel. And that means there's going to be a vast difference in the temperature range as well. I would encourage you to go online and pull up some charts and things and see that for yourself. But in general, in the month of May, while we're going to be traveling, as we think about averages, okay? If you're in Tiberias, the northern part of Israel, around the Sea of Galilee, while we're staying there, you can expect lows to be about 65 degrees. And then highs are going to reach up to about 90 degrees Fahrenheit. When we're in Jerusalem, it's going to be a little bit cooler because Jerusalem is at a higher elevation. So there you can expect the morning lows to be about 60 degrees, and the highs are going to be nice and pleasant, up around 80 degrees. When we travel down to the Dead Sea, and thankfully we'll only endure those temperatures for a day or two, but when we're traveling down there, you can expect it to be considerably warmer. The lows are going to be about 75, and the highs could be 90, 95, even 100 degrees. So we will need to dress for all of those various climates that we're going to go to, which brings us to the conversation of weather. I would encourage you to dress in layers. There's going to be a 35-degree swing in the temperature, and be ready for that. Having said that, the lowest it's going to be maybe 55, 60, 65 degrees. You don't need to bring coats or anything heavy of that nature. What I would suggest you bring is just cool, loose-fitting clothing, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to some of the packing tips. You might carry a light jacket or a sweater if you're the kind of person who gets cold easily, and that's helpful not only in the land of Israel, but that's also nice to have when you're on the flight and things of that nature as well. I would not pack rain gear. I wouldn't pack umbrellas or anything like that. The reality is that Israel has two seasons. It has the wet season and it has the dry season. The dry season exists between about March and about October. And during that time, there is very little, if any, rainfall in the land of Israel. For example, for the month of May, while we're going to be there for the entire month of May, they average 1/4 of an inch of rain or less. So you don't really have to worry about rain. I'm not taking any gear personally. If I find that I need it, I'll purchase it when I get there, but I don't think we're going to need it. Also, I would encourage you, don't go out and buy a new wardrobe. You don't have to do that to be able to travel to the land of Israel. Just wear the kind of clothing that you would wear at home. Having said that, I would stay away from heavy cotton clothing. Personally, I wouldn't wear blue jeans, but that's just my personal preference because it's hot. If it gets wet, it stays wet the rest of the day, and you're just not very comfortable. So dress comfortably. Also dress modestly. Keep in mind, modesty standards in Israel are very relaxed. Modesty is less of an issue there than it is here in the States, but there is an exception to that rule. And that exception is when we're visiting various religious sites, like say, for example, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. When we're visiting those places, which we will be often, we need to follow their guidelines as to what they consider to be appropriate and not. If we don't follow their guidelines, we may not be allowed to go into the site. So it's very important that you do so. Now, you don't have to dress that way every single day. The tour guide is really good about telling us where we're going each day and what the modesty expectations are of the day. But I mention this because their standards there are a little bit different than they are here in the U.S., and I want to prepare you for that. Mostly what that means is no sleeveless shirts, particularly on the days that we're going to be visiting those important religious sites. You need to make sure that your shirts have sleeves, that your shoulders are covered. That's very important. Also, your midsection needs to be covered as well. I don't think we have to worry about that on the trip, but just to kind of keep that in mind. And of course, that means no low-cut blouses or anything of that nature that would be too revealing. And of course, no shorts. Your knees need to be covered. I've read that capris, and I think capris were probably more popular a few years ago than they are now, but I've read that capris are acceptable in most places, but I don't remember if that's true for every single place, but I think you would probably be okay. Also take a hat or take a scarf that you can cover your head as you enter into some of the religious sites. And when I say a hat, a ball cap is certainly acceptable for you guys and also for you ladies if you prefer to do that. But we just need to be ready to enter into those sites. Which brings me into packing tips, and in that we'll talk a little bit more about clothing. And one of the things that I want to suggest to you is pack lightly. Pack lightly. That's the most important tip I can give to you. Most people way overpack for trips of this nature, and it's not necessary, and it just creates a lot more effort on your behalf, and it makes you very uncomfortable. The reality is you're solely responsible for your luggage all the time. So whether you're traveling to the airport, wherever that might be in Atlanta, or whether that's getting your luggage from the airport in Tel Aviv and taking it to the bus, or taking it from the bus to the hotel and back again, you're responsible for keeping up with your luggage. So you want to pack light. You don't want to have to lug around 2 50-pound bags with you the entire time that we're in the country of Israel. And having said that, you also need to know that the luggage space on the coaches is limited. Therefore, Maranatha Tours request that you only bring one checked-in bag and one carry-on bag. If everybody brought more than that, there just simply wouldn't be enough room on the coaches. So keep in mind again, one checked bag and one carry-on bag per person. And speaking of baggage, let's talk about those restrictions for just a little bit. As of right now, our airfare has not been purchased, so I don't know for sure what airlines we will be flying with. Typically with Maranatha, you're going to fly with Turkish Airlines, which means you're going to have a layover in Turkey on the way to Tel Aviv. But nonetheless, the rule for Turkish Airlines is, unless it's changed in the last couple of years, and we might want to verify that to be absolutely sure, but they do allow 2 bags at 50 pounds each. Keep in mind, the rule with Maranatha, though, is 1 bag. And that's included in your international fare. However, the problem is, if you're flying out of Atlanta or Nashville or some other place, you're going to be flying on a different domestic carrier to get to New York, and their luggage rules are going to be different. Turkish allows you to have an international bag, no charge. In this day and time, most domestic airlines don't. So we need to be aware of what those rules are before we fly. Most airlines say it's $25 per checked bag, or at least for the first checked bag, and typically it may be $35, $40 for the second checked bag. Again, I can't verify that information for sure because at this time the airfare has yet to be booked. But as we get closer, I will let you know for sure. But just to keep in mind that domestic luggage fee is not included in your package price, and you need to be made aware of it, okay? And most of the time, that checked baggage rule means that you can have a suitcases up to 62 linear inches. And that is the length plus the width plus the height, okay? You add those figures together, you come up to 62 inches. If it's larger than that, you will likely be charged an excess luggage fee, and those can get very expensive. So please pay attention to the size and the weight of your checked bag. Also, your carry-on bag has certain requirements that it has to fit within. For Turkish Airlines, it has to weigh 17 pounds or less, which isn't much. So make sure that you weigh your luggage. I have heard in recent years of them actually weighing your check-in bag on occasion and charging a fine if it's over that amount. Now, the last time that I looked at their website, and again, it's been a couple of years ago, but the dimensions for your checked-in luggage was 9 inches by 15 inches by 21 inches for your checked bag. But you can check their website for the latest details to make sure that's still accurate. So again, you can have a checked bag, you can have a carry-on bag, you can also have a personal bag, like a handbag for ladies or a briefcase or something of that nature. But I'll try to get you greater information concerning all of those rules when we get closer to travel. One of the things I would suggest to you, though, is concerning medication. If you have any medication, please make sure it's in your carry-on bag. You do not want that in a checked bag. It could be lost, then you would be without your medication. And also make sure that all of your medication is in its original packaging. That's very important. Don't take it out and put it into daily planners or anything of that nature. Make sure it's in the original packaging. It's also good to make sure you've got a copy of your prescription with you. That way, if there's any question as to what you're carrying, or if you were to run out or lose your medication, you would be able to replenish it while you're on the trip. So make sure that you have the medication in the original bottle, and also make sure you have a copy of your prescription with you. Also, as you're packing, most people are going to carry some kind of electrical appliance with you. You're going to have chargers for your phone, for your cameras, laptops, maybe razors, all of that sort of stuff. And if you're planning to carry those types of things with you on your trip, you need to be aware that the electricity in Israel is different than it is here in the States. The voltage is different, and the kind of plug they use to physically plug it into the wall is different. Voltage in Israel is 230 volt and 50 cycle. You need a converter to make sure that your 110 appliance can be utilized on their power supply. However, what you can do as well is look at your charger pack, and it will tell you what the input requirements are. And some appliances will allow you to use dual voltage. Some of them will say on there that they're good for 110, 240, or something of that nature. If they say that, you don't have to have a converter, and you're great. And that's true for a lot of cell phone chargers and camera chargers and things of that nature today. But you still need to check and make sure that it's good. If it just says 110 or something of that nature, make sure you get a converter. If you try to plug it in to the wall and that wall is 230 volts, you're going to have a problem. You're going to fry the electronic device. You might even start a fire, and that's not going to be pleasant for anybody. So make absolutely sure that your appliance can run on that voltage. If it can't, make sure you have the appropriate converter with you. The one thing I would say to you is there are certain appliances that typically are not dual voltage, and that's hair dryers, flat irons, curling irons, things of that nature. They're typically 110 only, which means you would need a converter. The problem is that getting a converter for a high wattage appliance of that nature is A, they're very expensive, B, they're big and they're heavy, C, they really don't work all that well, and I've read of people frying their appliances even with those converters. So my advice is avoid them. Don't get a converter for hair dryers and curling irons and things like that. Instead, if you'll look at Amazon and some other sites, you can actually find specific dual voltage hair dryers and things of that nature, and they're typically not all that expensive. They're typically much cheaper than the converter that you would need. So I would recommend getting one of those appliances instead and making sure that you turn the switch that's on the appliance to convert it from 110 to 230 before you plug it into the wall. Now, having said that, you're also going to need an adapter. And the reality is that the adapter in Israel is much different than it is here in the U.S. In fact, in Israel, you'll find about 2 or 3 different plugs that could be utilized. So you're going to have to pick up an adapter, and you can pick these up in a variety of places. But the 2 that are most prevalent in Israel is one is called a type H, and one is called a type C. This is the adapter that is often used in Europe. It's 2 prongs, and they're both round. This is the type H that is often used in newer places in Israel. It's 3 prongs. They've added a grounding prong. This is one that I ordered from B&H Photo. If you can find them without these flat prongs, and they have round prongs, that's what I would recommend. They work a little bit easier. But I have found that these 2-prong ones will often work even where there's a 3-prong outlet in the wall. So I would carry one of each if it were me, and maybe a little surge protector or something of that nature. That way you don't have to buy a whole bunch of these. But you're going to need an adapter. So you need a converter if your appliance isn't dual voltage, and you also need an adapter. So make sure that you have those before you travel. One of the other questions that people typically have concerning travel to Israel has to do with how they're going to communicate with their loved ones back home. Now, this is an area in which things have changed in recent years. It used to, I told people, don't take your U.S. cell phone with you because they're incredibly expensive to utilize. In fact, that can still be the case with certain carriers. So before you take your cell phone with you to Israel, make absolutely sure you understand perfectly well what all of their fees are. There have been stories of people who've taken their U.S. cell phones with them and traveled to another country and utilized the data, only to come home and receive a cell phone bill at several $1,000s. So be very, very careful. Make sure you know what your calling requirements are and your messaging requirements and your data requirements are. Make sure you understand all of those fees so that you don't get surprised. On the last trip, we actually secured cell phones in Israel for many of us, and that worked very well. And we did so because utilizing our U.S. phones was just prohibitively expensive. But things have changed. And I know with AT&T, and I believe with Verizon, they have plans that are much more feasible to utilize. I know with AT&T, I can get a plan for $10 a day that will allow me to use whatever plan I have here in the States. Here in the States, I have an unlimited plan. Unlimited calling, texting, and data. But for you, make sure you know the carrier you're utilizing and what their fee structure looks like. You can also use Skype and various other technologies that exist over a Wi-Fi network. There is Wi-Fi available in the hotel lobbies. It's not guaranteed in the rooms, but there is certainly Wi-Fi at least available in the lobby. In fact, Wi-Fi is available in Israel in many places more than it is here in the U.S. Israel is not a third world country by any stretch of the imagination. They are very technologically advanced. More cell phones per capita in Israel than in any other country in the world. So I don't think you're going to have a problem, but at least that's an option. And for whatever reason, none of those options work, you can look in your booklet, page 14, advertises travel sale, I believe, in which you can purchase a cell phone or rent a cell phone to take with you here from the U.S. Let's talk about clothing more for just a moment. One of the things that I would recommend to people is don't try to take an outfit for every single day that you're there. If you do so, you're going to discover that suitcase is going to be very, very heavy. So what I suggest is you take 3 to 4 outfits. Find clothing that's lightweight, that's wrinkle resistant, and that dries very quickly. And what I do is I wear one outfit and I take 2 additional ones with me. And I wash those outfits in the sink every night. I take little packets of laundry detergent to be able to do so, and I hang them to dry. Typically by the next morning, they're ready to go. If not, certainly by that afternoon, they would be ready to use for the next day. But perhaps the most important piece of clothing that you can carry with you are good, sturdy, broken-in shoes. And I would recommend that you have 2 pairs of shoes. The pair of shoes that you're wearing and another pair that you're going to pack in your baggage with you. And I say that because sometimes if your feet are sore at the end of the day, just simply changing to a different pair of shoes sometimes can give comfort to you. But make sure they're sturdy shoes, okay? In Israel, there are many, many steps. There's a lot of uneven ground. There's rocks and things of that nature that you may not be used to here in the U.S. And it would be easier for you to hurt your ankle in case you step down incorrectly or something of that nature. So make sure that you've got good, sturdy shoes. Along with that, I would encourage you at least a couple of months before we travel, start getting in shape. There's a lot of walking, a lot of uphill and downhill in steps, and start walking some each day for a couple of months before we leave. That way you won't be so tired once we get there and you start seeing how much walking there truly is on a trip of this nature, right? And one other point as well, if we get to go to the Dead Sea, you'll have the opportunity to float in the Dead Sea, which is a wonderful experience. If you do so, you might want to take a pair of sandals or water shoes or something of that nature, which are just cheap and expensive. You don't want to take anything nice. Because sometimes some of those salt crystals on the bottom of the sea floor there can be a little bit rough. So you might want to have something to kind of protect your feet for that experience. Also, there are so many packing lists out there to give you suggestions of what to take and what not to take. And I won't get into all of that on this video, but I would encourage you, obviously, to take a Bible, to take a notebook, to take a pen, something to write with, along with all of your other things, your medications and all the other things that you're going to need daily. And be sure, before you pack your stuff, go to TSA's website and see what the latest guidelines are for flying. You don't want to get to the airport and have things packed that you're not allowed to take with you. So I'll try to post up some of those lists for you on our Facebook page, but you can certainly go and Google it and find it yourself. But just make sure you follow their guidelines. If you utilize locks on your luggage, make sure they're TSA approved. If you don't, they'll actually cut them off and then you'll lose your luggage. So make sure they're TSA approved locks if you're the person who wants to utilize a lock on your luggage. And again, there's going to be some final packing tips, I'm sure, in the booklet you will get right before we leave, but those are just a few helpful hints for now. All right, well, let's talk about trip details just a little bit. As you're aware, our trip is going to depart out of New York. Now, that means we still have to get to New York, and you're all aware that we're responsible for the cost of the ticket to get to New York. I think most of us will probably be flying out of Atlanta. If you're close by, you're more than welcome to travel with us. We'll be taking a bus out of our church at First Baptist Church here in Spring City, Tennessee. We'll be traveling down to Atlanta together, and then we'll also have a bus to pick us up. That way, you're not responsible for parking a car at one of the parking lots in Atlanta for 10 days, which could get quite expensive. The plan would be that we would share the expense of doing so. I would estimate that expense to probably be somewhere in the neighborhood of $25 to $30 per person if you decide to do that to cover the gas and expenses of those buses. And we also might want to get a small gift for our drivers who are volunteering their time to take us to Atlanta and also to pick us up. Now, when it comes to the flight, again, we don't have those details yet. When we do, I'll certainly pass those along to you. But just know that from whatever departure city we leave from, whether it be Atlanta, Nashville, or somewhere else, we'll be flying to New York. We'll probably also have another layover somewhere. Most likely it'll be Istanbul if we're flying on Turkish Airlines. And then we'll fly into Tel Aviv. From Tel Aviv, we'll be boarding the Maranatha Tours bus, and we'll be traveling to our final destination for that evening, which will be the Sea of Galilee, where we'll be staying in our hotel. But just kind of keep in mind that. Also know that there's a 7-hour time difference between Israel and here. So they are 7 hours ahead of Eastern Standard Time. And that's important to keep in mind as you're communicating with your loved ones back home. Having said that, we'll talk a little bit about where we're staying. And I don't want to mention that in great detail simply because that's always subject to change. The last trip that we went on, it changed while we were traveling to Israel, and we were actually booked in a different hotel. Having said that, the hotels we stayed at were all very nice. There were no concerns with them whatsoever. But if you're curious and you just kind of want to look up what's scheduled at this point in time, there are 2 hotels we're going to be staying at. One is in Tiberias on the Sea of Galilee, and it's called the Leonardo Club Hotel. The other hotel we'll be staying at is in Jerusalem, and it's called the Ambassador Hotel. Those are the 2 places that we'll be staying. And speaking of the hotels, we'll be eating most of our meals there. We'll have a buffet breakfast in the morning. We'll also have a buffet dinner in the evening. And those typically have a combination of Israeli and American cuisines, though certainly the food is going to be a little bit different from what you're used to at home. Having said that, it's all good food. I don't think anybody will have concerns. However, if you have any allergies whatsoever, please let us know. Particularly, please let Maranatha Tours know as soon as possible so that they can get with the cooks and the chefs to make sure that they have something available that you'll be able to eat. Lunches, of course, as I've said before, we're on our own. As we travel out through the countryside, our drivers will take us to restaurants to be able to eat our lunches. So what's our daily schedule look like? Well, the typical morning starts about 6 o'clock in the morning, and we have breakfast about 7, and we board the buses about 8. We travel through the course of the day. We'll typically get back to the hotel around 5 or 6 o'clock. We'll have dinner around 7, and then you'll be free after that. Most people are going to go back to the room. They're going to wash their clothing. They're going to get ready for the next day and go to bed. Certainly, you're free to get out in the evening and walk around and do whatever you want to explore the area if you have extra energy to be able to do that. One thing I would like to mention to you, though, it's very important. Every morning at 8 a.m. or whatever time we're told to board the bus, that you be at the bus prior to time of departure. Our buses leave promptly every morning. And if you're not at the location, the bus driver may leave you there. They simply don't have the time to check with 35 people to see where everybody's at, and they will naturally assume that you just simply have chosen to opt out of traveling with the tour group for that day. So please make sure that you're in the right location at the right time so that you don't miss out on a day of touring. All right. Well, I think that's more than enough to digest for this video. And though these details really aren't all that exciting, they're important. And I hope that I've been able to help you just a little bit. Nevertheless, I am so excited that you're going to be traveling with all of us to the Holy Land. And you know, they say it's the trip of a lifetime, and that's true in many ways. But I've also discovered that one of the things this trip is going to cause you to do is simply want to go back. There's just so much to see, and there's so much to do, and it's hard to pack it all in to one trip. That's what happened to me. It's what happened to a number of other people who are traveling with us on this trip. They're wanting to go back again. So it's a wonderful trip, and I know you're going to have a great time. Nevertheless, it's been great talking to you. If time allows, I plan to put together additional videos talking about the various sites that we're going to be visiting. But even if I can't find the time to do that, I want to encourage you, start reading your Bible daily. Even start now if you're not already. And make sure you begin to study some of those sites we're going to be visiting. If you do so, it will really benefit your travel when you get there. That way you'll know what you're looking at before you even arrive at the site, and you're just going to have that much greater of an experience. Well, God bless. Great talking to you. Look forward to seeing you again very soon.